What are the main sources of special education funding in the U.S.? Have you ever wondered how special education is funded in the United States? Understanding the sources of funding can help families and educators navigate the system more effectively. Let's break it down into three main levels of government: federal, state, and local. Each plays a unique role in ensuring students with disabilities receive the education they need. First, let's talk about federal funding. The federal government contributes about 10 to 15% of the total funding for special education. The largest source of these funds comes from the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This act ensures that children with disabilities receive early intervention, special education, and related services. It is divided into two parts. Part B serves children ages 3 to 21, while Part C focuses on infants and toddlers from birth to age 2. The funds from the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act are sent to states, which then distribute them to local school districts. Another federal source is the Every Student Succeeds Act. This act provides additional funding aimed at supporting student achievement, particularly in low-income areas. While the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act was designed to cover up to 40% of special education costs, the actual contribution has historically been much lower, often covering less than 15%. This creates a gap that states and local districts must fill. Next, we have state funding. States contribute to special education through their own budgets, using various formulas to allocate money. The amount of funding and the methods of distribution can vary widely from one state to another. States often provide extra funds to local districts based on the number of students with disabilities and the intensity of their needs. Some states also have policies to help balance funding disparities that arise from differences in local wealth. Finally, local funding plays a significant role. Local governments, primarily through property taxes, provide the largest share of funding for special education, often between 40 and 50% of the total. Local funds are used to cover costs that are not met by federal and state sources. Because local funding relies heavily on property tax revenues, there can be considerable differences in the resources available for special education across various communities and districts. It is also important to note that special education funding is typically considered additional to the basic education funding that all students receive. This means that students with disabilities receive funding from both the general education budget and special education-specific allocations. Funding formulas may differ for different age groups, such as preschool children and school-aged children. Understanding these funding sources is essential for families and educators. The availability and quality of special education services can vary based on local and state funding levels. Advocacy for increased federal funding and fair state funding formulas is vital to address funding shortfalls and disparities. Local districts may also use flexible funds from other sources to cover and met costs, which can affect how resources are allocated within schools. In summary, special education funding in the United States is a collaborative effort involving federal grants, state allocations, and local tax revenues. This multi-level funding structure aims to ensure that children with disabilities receive the necessary services, although funding gaps and disparities continue to pose challenges.